this is literally the presentation I did for US rowing. So it's rowing based, but I'm gonna kind of tweak it along the way. So don't mind me kind of skipping slides, and obviously a lot of rowing being included here. What I started with the presentation was I talked about how we need to change our mindset about injuries. And again, I was speaking specifically to the rowing community, but this can be applied to general population or any other sport. You just have to understand that sport and apply it to them. So I think a lot of people, specifically in the rowing community, accept injuries as normal. And you could probably replace rowing with CrossFit. So injury rates for rowing are 32 to 51% of people will get a injury every year. And then 82% will have back pain every year, wow, which is really, really high. And if you compare that to non-contact sports, rowing's non-contact, they have the highest injury rate in non-contact sports, and they actually have higher injury rates than other contact sports. Not all of them, but some. So like comparing the stats, you realize there's a problem. Unfortunately, a lot of people kind of approach exercise or their sport, and they assume that there's a risk involved. I'm going to get injured. There's not much I can do. So that's what I started with, because I wanted to let everyone know that there's a lot of things that we can do to improve our health and reduce the chance of injury. You can't prevent it, but you can significantly reduce the chance of it happening in the first place. And I think when you really understand anatomy, it starts to help you figure out the value of movement. And then when you understand the value of movement, you can start to see how that will change the health of the participant. So what I did here was I went back and forth between anatomy and rowing mechanics and just compared it. But again, this is relevant to everyone. So I'm kind of walking you guys through what I discovered over the last 10 months and kind of opened my eyes to some new thought processes. So there's 4 motions of the ankle, right? So you have dorsiflexion when the ankle pulls up. Something to note is that the talus here, when it comes up into dorsiflexion, it actually slides backwards. So you watch that again. So it slides backwards underneath. And then there is plantar flexion when it pulls down. There's eversion as it rolls out. And then there's, inversion as it rolls in. So you guys all knew those motions already. But what's important is that it's those motions that actually load our system. I'm going to skip that one. So it's those motions that load our body as one system so that we can be resilient and elastic. So I'm going to talk about one fascial line here. There's several. You guys have probably heard of fascia before. Fascia, in the simplest terms, basically wraps your body in a layer of saran wrap. So it wraps muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints, and it even wraps your organs. And what that does is it interlinks and connects us. So like the example I'm going to use here is your big toe is actually connected to your forehead by a fascial line. So the superficial back line specifically attaches the big toe to the forehead. So let me show you here. So as we zoom in here, so it would attach right here. It loops up behind your heel, up the back of your leg, up your low back, your upper back, your neck, and then it wraps around and it actually finishes and attaches here. So everything, all these little motions that connect at your big toe, all the motions at your ankle can actually affect your neck, your back, everything that's connected in that line. So pretty fascinating, pretty crazy. I heard about fascia for a long time. I still don't fully understand it. It's very complex. But the idea is that that's why little motions can affect our health and also affect our elasticity. And then I just have a little video kind of explaining the difference between using brute force versus using elastic energy. So when we have those motions, when we have adequate motions, every joint, but specifically for this talk at the foot and ankle, we're able to stretch and load and explode. When we don't have those motions, the rubber band just kind of drops to the floor. So try this one. This is the best one. I think Paul actually showed me this. Put your hand on your chest. I'm watching.
Creeper.
All right. Hit yourself with your middle finger as hard as you can. Now take your middle finger, pull it back, and now hit yourself as hard as you can. Notice the difference? So that comparison is basically comparing brute force with elastic force. So if I just try really hard, but I'm not actually using my fascial system as a taut rubber band, I'm just kind of hitting myself with my finger. Once I'm able to load, I'm more elastic, right? And the goal is that my body is elastic and efficient and springy, right? So those are the motions of the ankle. That's the elastic and the fascial potential. And then another really cool thing is the structure. So have you guys ever had a coach tell you toes up, toes up, toes up?
Yes.
Anybody? Yeah. So I thought I understood that. And I thought I understood the value until I actually looked at this video. So this is, all these videos that I have on here is from Complete Anatomy. It's an app you have to pay for that I downloaded, and basically I just nerd out and I watch videos and it makes me think of things. But so this is really cool. So I always heard toes up. I knew it was valuable. I coached my athletes to do it too. But here's why it's actually valuable. So let me show you this video. So when we go into dorsiflexion, the ankle pulls up, and when you see that it pulls all the way up into dorsiflexion here, it locks bone on bone. It literally is just locked in nice and stable. And then when it pulls down, it gaps. There's a big space here. So what that means is when I'm locked up here, I have adequate dorsiflexion, my toes are pulled up. So let's say I'm running. I have adequate dorsiflexion, my toes pulled up. I have a stable base so that when I hit the ground, I'm already loaded, I'm stable, and I'm ready to roll up onto my toes, explode, and continue on. What happens when people go with their foot pointed down is they're not locked in place. So there's this give. So they hit the ground and they hit, their heel falls, and then they pop up and go. So they don't have the stable base. They're not loaded efficiently. And then they're also adding more wear and tear to the body because they have like that every single step. Anyway, so I thought that was really cool because I've heard it and I've actually coached it, toes up, toes up, toes up. And I was like, yeah, this is why. But seeing it makes a big difference for me. Actually, what I wanted to touch on was the motions real quick. So dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, eversion, right? All those motions. So I didn't really think about how eversion and inversion could actually contribute to walking and running, and therefore any sport that involves your foot, how much that could contribute to health and performance. So when you walk, you actually, so you go into dorsiflexion, and then you actually evert a little bit. So that's the loading mechanics. Your foot goes into dorsiflexion, you evert. That's you basically stretching your rubber band. And then you roll up onto your big toe, you go into plantar flexion and you invert. So that's the exploding mechanics. What happens is inversion and eversion, they actually have, when you have adequate motion there, they have the ability to produce 8 times your body weight in elastic forces, which is absolutely insane. Because those are little motions that you don't even think about, and a lot of times you don't even see them. And then the same mechanics happen in the rowing stroke. Our body likes to load a certain way, our body likes to explode a certain way. And the same mechanics happen with running, and the same mechanics happen with squatting. When you go down, you go into dorsiflexion, you evert, you plantar flex, and you invert. It's very slight, and you don't go onto your toes into plantar flexion, but those are the motions that load in that movement. This one's super cool to me too. So this is more neurological, understanding the value of sensory input and how it affects our movement. What we touch, what we see, what we hear determines what we experience, and that determines what we do, and that determines how we move. So in our field, there's a common phrase called sensory input equals motor output. So basically what you see, hear, and do determines how you move, right? sensory input equals motor output. And the way we receive this information is through mechanoreceptors. You guys know some of them, right? So there's several mechanoreceptors, there's different ones, and they all respond to different stimulus, right? And they're also located in different areas. So you have them in your skin, you have them in your joints, your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles. So if you think about your foot is one of the most sensitive structures in your body. And the way your foot responds or receives information is through touch and vibration. So the mechanoreceptors are stimulated through touch and vibration in your foot. The problem is that we wear shoes and socks, so we blunt that input. So we don't get the same input we used to get. The really cool thing is that when we have adequate stimulation, our body tells us what to fire, when to fire, how to fire, at what intensity. And that determines our health and our performance. Stimulate your foot with touch and vibration, sends a signal up to your brain, and it tells you what muscle to fire, when, how, etc. What happens is when that stimulation is off, you start getting things like stress fractures because the right muscles aren't firing at the right time. So it ends up vibrating the bones in your leg, running, for example, and then you get stress fractures because your body's strong and able. It's not doing the things at the right time. So changing the amount or the kind of input that you're getting can change your health. They're also in your joint, right? So if this is my ankle joint and I only have this much range, I'm only stimulating that many mechanoreceptors. If I have this much range, I'm now stimulating that many more. So I'm getting more feedback to my brain. So that's increasing proprioception. So now I can move better. Okay, so you're at an art museum. You're enjoying this beautiful art piece. You're talking about what the artist was thinking about. And then all of a sudden, the lights go out. So all of a sudden, my stimulus has changed. I've lost my eyes. And that's all of a sudden going to change the way I move, right? So now I'm in the dark, and I'm probably going to duck down. I'm going to start kind of like feeling around so that I don't trip or fall, right? So that's just an example of the difference between having good sensory input versus bad sensory input and how that will affect your movement. So then I related it to coaching rowing. This could be applied to any sport, but what I was saying was, imagine you're this coach and you're coaching this athlete, and this athlete will not make a change. They're not changing anything about their technique. You've been working all day, you're getting frustrated. So what you do is you zoom up closer to him to yell at him louder. And what you realize is that he's wearing headphones. So the whole practice, he hasn't heard anything you've said. So what you have to do is you have to identify his limitation. So for this talk, the ankle, right? So let's say he has a limited ankle. He's not stimulating as many mechanoreceptors as his better teammates. So all of a sudden you're like, oh, you got an issue here. Let's clean that up. You take his headphones off, and then all of a sudden he can perform better or as good as his other teammates. Obviously an analogy for how limitations can affect your movement, but that honestly happens more often than you think. A lot of coaches I'm trying to get through to in rowing are there's just these athletes who are very limited and they can't make any changes, and the coaches just get mad at them and eventually they give up on them. And I've been that coach as well. I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but what I was trying to do was, it actually started with a question from my friend. He was like, what prerequisites do you need to be healthy and to perform well in rowing? And I was like, I don't actually know. So what I did was I dug into research and my personal experience and kind of started doing measures. And I actually came up with prerequisites for what you need to be healthy and perform well in rowing, and they didn't exist before. But this has been done, or this can be done for any sport or any interest that you guys have, and it can be super valuable. So really quickly, in a closed chain environment, what all that means is that your foot's on the floor here. So there's open chain and there's closed chain. Open chain would be like if I'm measuring your ankle without it on the floor. So you're on a table, I'm measuring your ankle. And then this is closed chain on the floor, right? So if I measure my ankle in a closed chain position, physical therapists say 40 to 50 degrees is normal. And then what I did was I did things with rowing, and I determined what rowers need. And then I got into screens. So what I did was I came up with we obviously already know the NASM screens and the FMS that we went over, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to give easy screens that they could do on their own. All you do is you need a wall in your fist. You set up with your fist towards your thumb towards the wall, and you put the pinky towards your foot, and you just space yourself out a fist length away from the wall. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drive our knee forward without collapsing in and without letting the heel rise. And if you can touch the wall without compensation, I've measured a lot of people on this, you're somewhere between 40 and 45 degrees, which is a healthy range. So if you can do that without compensation, that's good. The problem with this is just pass and fail. So all you know is if you need to work on it or not. So what I did was I took it a step further, and you use your phone and you can get a specific number, kind of like a goniometer if you went to a physical therapist, right? Again, not 100% accurate because technology isn't perfect and you're not a doctor, but it'll get you pretty close. So you can pull out your phone, you can open the measure app, and you select level. You level it out on the floor. You take that same surface, you put it on your shin, right underneath your tibial tuberosity, and then you do the same test without the wall, and it gives you your ankle number. So I have 43 degrees of ankle range in my left ankle.
Impressive.
I usually have 45. I was upset when I filmed this video. I was like, dang it. So the cool thing is, like Jenny, for example, if you compare your two sides, maybe you have 38 on one side and you have 45 on the other. I don't know. It'll give us more information. And then
yeah, my left is definitely limited for that. I just tried it. So my heel comes up.
Okay. Yeah, so looking into kind of the difference and making sure that you're addressing that can change a lot. Then I got into solutions. So I think we've talked about this before. So you have to have a system for making a change. Almost every person I've worked with has this system. They have little tweaks, but it's basically the same thing. So to make a change, it's a 3-step process. This is how I organize it. Step 1 is you mobilize. So if I have a limitation at my ankle, for example, I'm going to do something to increase the range of motion. The problem is that's where most people stop. Most people stop after they mobilize, and it just comes back again. They have a problem again. Step 2 is you want to use it. You want to use that new motion that you opened up. And then step 3 is you want to maximize or lock that load in by strengthening it. Step 2, use it. So your body recognizes this new range of motion. And then step 3, strengthen it, okay? Those are the 3 things you want to do if you actually want to create lasting, healthy change when you're making changes to movement.